The sky over Gemini turned purple as the sun set. Ta stood at the edge of the colony's main building, watching the strange stars come out. He was far from Earth now, far from the green mountains of his homeland. But the stars made him feel less alone. Ta was not like other humans on Gemini. While they built machines and studied rocks, he understood animals. Back on Earth, he had worked with wolves, bears, and even the rare tigers that still lived in protected areas. Animals that scared most people did not scare Ta. Ta, come quick. Jin's voice came through his communicator. Something is happening. Ta ran to the colony's control room. 20 people stood looking at the big screen. On it, a ship unlike any human vessel moved toward Gemini. It entered our space 10 minutes ago, said Jin, pointing at the screen. It's not one of ours. Captain Lee turned to face everyone. This is it, people. First contact with a new alien race. Ta felt his heart beat faster. Humans had met 3 alien races since leaving Earth, but none had come to Gemini before. They're sending a message, said the communications officer. The screen changed. A face appeared. It looked almost human, but with pale blue skin and eyes that were too large. Female, Ta thought, and important by the way she held herself. People of Earth, she said in perfect English. I am Queen Sue of the Nuri. We have watched your kind for some time. We wish to talk. Captain Lee stepped forward. I am Captain Lee of the Earth colony Gemini. We welcome you, Queen Sue. The alien queen nodded. We will land in 6 hours. Prepare a meeting place. The screen went dark. Everyone began talking at once. Captain Lee raised his hands for quiet. This is a historic day, he said. Jin, prepare the meeting hall. Ta, I want you there too. Me? Tai asked, surprised. I'm just an animal expert. Exactly, said Captain Lee. We know nothing about these aliens. Your skills reading body language might help us. 6 hours later, Tai stood with 5 other humans in the meeting hall. His palms were sweaty. Through the windows, he saw the alien ship land in the field outside the colony. It was smooth and silver, shaped like a teardrop. A door opened in the ship's side. 3 Nuri walked out. They were tall and moved with grace. The one in front wore a silver crown, Queen Sue. But what made Ta's breath catch was the creature that followed them. It looked like a wolf, but much bigger, the size of a small horse. Its fur was silver blue and seemed to shimmer in the light. Its eyes glowed yellow. It walked beside Queen Sue, no leash, no chain. A guard animal, Ta whispered to himself. Interesting. The Nuri entered the meeting hall. Up close, Queen Sue was even more striking. Her blue skin had patterns that seemed to shift in the light. Captain Lee, she said, bowing slightly. Thank you for meeting us. The honor is ours, said Captain Lee, returning the bow. May I introduce our team? As Captain Lee named each human, Tai kept his eyes on the wolf creature. It stayed close to Queen Sue, watching everything. Its eyes showed intelligence, more than any Earth animal Tai had worked with. When Tai was introduced as our animal behavior expert, the Queen looked at him with new interest. You study beasts, she asked. I try to understand them, Tai corrected gently. On Earth, I worked with many predator species. Before Queen Sue could respond, one of the human diplomats, Kim, stepped forward with his hand extended, a standard Earth greeting. The movement was too sudden, too close to the Queen. The wolf creature moved like lightning. One moment it was still, the next it was on Kim, jaws clamped on his arm. The man screamed. Blood spattered the floor. Guards drew weapons. Shouting filled the room. Bake. Stop. Queen Sue commanded. The beast released Kim, who fell back, clutching his torn arm. Medics rushed to help him. Queen Sue turned to Captain Lee, her face showing real regret. I apologize. Buck is protective and cannot be fully controlled, even by me. Captain Lee's face was hard. With respect, Your Majesty, if your pet cannot be controlled, then perhaps this meeting should end. Ta said nothing, but he couldn't take his eyes off Buck. The wolf creature met his gaze, and for a moment, Tai felt something pass between them, a spark of understanding. First contact had not gone well, but for Tai, it was just beginning. The meeting room was tense. Kim sat with his arm wrapped in bandages while doctors gave him medicine for pain. Captain Lee stood with his arms crossed, looking at Queen Sue with hard eyes. "Your beast is dangerous," he said. "We cannot have talks if our people are not safe." Queen Sue nodded. Her blue face showed she was sorry. "I understand your anger. Buck has been with me for 7 years. He protects me from those who wish me harm. Can't you control him better?" asked Jin, looking at the wolf creature that now sat calmly at the queen's feet. Queen Sue shook her head. "Buck is a moonshade. They are the most dangerous hunters on our world. We catch them as pups, but they never fully tame." She touched the silver fur on Buck's head. 23 of my people have died trying to train him. Yet he has saved my life 6 times from killers." Tai listened with great interest. He watched how Bake moved, how the beast's yellow eyes tracked everything in the room. The moonshade was smart, smarter than most animals Tai had worked with. "Then I must ask you to return to your ship," said Captain Lee. "We cannot risk more injuries." The queen's face fell. Tai could see she truly wanted peace with humans. Her next words surprised everyone. "What if one of your people could tame back?" she asked. "Would that show our good faith?" The room went quiet. Then Captain Lee laughed. "Impossible. You said your own people died trying." "The Nuri have great tech, but little understanding of animal minds," said Queen Sue. "Perhaps humans are different. If any human can make Bake obey basic commands within 14 days, I will share our star maps and trade routes with Earth. This would make your people very rich." The humans looked at each other. Star maps from the Nuri would be worth billions. New trade routes could help Earth's growing space economy. "And if we fail?" asked Captain Lee. "Then we leave in peace, but without a deal," said the Queen. Captain Lee shook his head. "Too dangerous. I won't risk more lives." "I'll do it." Everyone turned to look at Ta. He hadn't planned to speak, but the words came out anyway. "Ta." "No," said Jin. "You saw what it did to Kim." But Ta kept his eyes on Buck. The moonshade stared back, and Ta felt that same connection again. "I've worked with Earth's most dangerous predators," said Ta. "Wolves, bears, big cats. I think I can do this." "You would risk your life?" asked Queen Sue, her large eyes wide with surprise. "Not risk," said Ta. "I don't think Bake wants to hurt anyone. He was protecting you because the movement seemed threatening." Captain Lee pulled Tai aside. "This is crazy. You're not doing this." "We need this deal," said Ta quietly. "And I think I can do it. The way Bake moves, the way he watches, he's smart. Not just animal smart. He understands more than the Nuri think." Captain Lee looked torn. Finally, he turned to Queen Sue. "If Tai wants to try, we accept your challenge. But we have conditions." For the next hour, they worked out the details. Ta would have 3 days to prepare. He would meet Bike in a special area with safety barriers. Guards would watch with stun weapons in case things went wrong. As the meeting ended, Queen Sue approached Ta alone. "No human has ever been this close to a moonshade without being attacked," she said. "Why do you think you can succeed where my people failed?" Ta smiled. "On Earth, humans and wolves evolved together. For thousands of years, we watched each other, learned from each other. Some wolves even became dogs. Our friends. Maybe Bake needs a friend, not a master." The Queen looked confused. "Friend? Bak has killed many Nuri. Perhaps they tried to control him through fear," said Ta. "I will try a different way." As the Nuri left the building, Bake turned his massive head. His yellow eyes found Ta again. The huge beast made a low sound, not a growl, but something softer. Todd felt a chill run down his back. Was it fear? Excitement? He wasn't sure, but he knew the next 14 days would change everything, if he survived them. Ty sat in front of 3 screens in his small room. For 2 days now, he had done almost nothing but study. His eyes were tired, but his mind was full of new knowledge about the Moonshades. Queen Sue had given him all the Nuri files on Buck and his kind. They were massive predators from the northern forests of the Nuri homeworld. Humans had never seen their planet, but the pictures showed a world of blue trees and purple skies. "You're crazy to do this," said Jin, bringing Ty a cup of hot tea. "That thing will tear you apart." Tay took the tea with a smile. "Maybe, but I don't think so." He pointed to one of the screens. "Look at this." The screen showed a video of Blake pacing in his holding area on the Nuri ship. The beast moved back and forth, his silver-blue fur catching the light. "See how he moves?" asked Ta. "He's not angry or scared. He's bored." Jin shook his head. Bored or not, he took a chunk out of Kim's arm. "Because he thought Kim was threatening the queen," said Ta. "But look at this." He played another video. This one showed Buck with a young Nuri child who had somehow gotten into his cage. Instead of attacking, Bake simply sniffed the child and then lay down nearby, watching. "The Nuri don't understand their own animals," said Ta. "They think Moonshades are just killing machines. But they're more complex." Ta had learned many things in his 2 days of study. Moonshades lived in small family groups in the wild. They hunted together and cared for their young together. Most interesting to Ta was how they talked to each other. "They use smells," he explained to Jin. "Special chemicals from glands on their necks and paws. And they use body movements too. Very small ones that the Nuri never noticed." Ta had always been good at seeing patterns that others missed. As a child, he had watched animals for hours, learning their secret language. Now he was doing the same with an alien beast. "The Nuri try to control Moonshades with pain and fear," said Tai, showing Jin another video. In it, a Nuri trainer used a shock stick on a young Moonshade. No wonder they never fully tamed them. "So what will you do differently?" asked Jin. Tai smiled. "I'll talk to Blake in his own language." For the rest of the day, Todd worked on his plan. He made a special oil with smells that, according to Nuri science, should tell a Moonshade that he was not a threat. He practiced body positions that would show respect rather than fear or challenge. That night, Ty couldn't sleep. Tomorrow he would meet Bake face to face, with no barriers between them. He was not afraid, but he was excited. This was why he had come to the stars, to find new life, new minds to understand. In the morning, Captain Lee came to see him. "Last chance to back out," said the captain. "No one will think less of you." Ta shook his head. "I'm ready." They walked to the meeting area together. The Nuri had built a large round space with high walls. Seats looked down from above, where people could watch safely. Queen Sue was already there with her advisors. She nodded to Ta. "Your bravery honors us," she said. "Few Nuri would face a Moonshade by choice." "It's not bravery," said Ta. "It's curiosity." A door opened on the far side of the round space. Buck walked in slowly. He was even bigger than Tay remembered. His yellow eyes found Ta right away. "Remember the escape plan," whispered Captain Lee. "If you run for the red door, we'll open it right away and close it behind you." Ta nodded, but he had no plan to run. That would trigger Buck's hunting instinct. Instead, he had a different idea. "Wish me luck," he said, and stepped into the round space. The door closed behind him. Now it was just Ta and Buck, human and alien beast, alone together. Buck's yellow eyes narrowed. He took one step forward, then another. Tay took a deep breath. Everything he had learned was about to be tested. Everyone watching held their breath. Humans and Nuri alike leaned forward in their seats. Below them, Ta stood alone with Buck, the most feared Moonshade in the Nuri fleet. Beck's yellow eyes fixed on Ta. The huge wolf-like creature lowered his head. The silver-blue fur on his back stood up. His lips pulled back to show teeth as long as Ta's fingers. "He's going to charge," whispered Jin from the viewing area. "Get the stun guns ready." Beck's muscles tensed. Then, with a deep growl that seemed to shake the floor, he ran straight at Ta. Captain Lee reached for the emergency button that would drop a barrier between Ta and the beast. But Ta held up his hand to stop him. Ta did not run. He did not shout. Instead, he dropped to one knee and lowered his head. He turned his body at an angle, not facing back directly. From a small bottle at his belt, he let 3 drops of a special oil fall onto his wrist. Vake was halfway across the room, running fast, when the scent hit him. The moonshade slowed. His head tilted to one side. The growl became quieter. 5 steps away from Tai, Vake stopped. "Impossible," said one of the Nuri advisors. "He should have attacked by now." Queen Sue leaned forward, her large eyes wide with surprise. "What is the human doing?" Tai still hadn't moved. His head was down, eyes looking at the floor. His body language said clearly in moonshade terms, "I am not a threat. I show respect." The oil on his wrist sent another message. "I am not prey. I am not enemy." Buck took one step closer, then another. Now he was close enough that Tai could feel the moonshade's hot breath on his face. One snap of those massive jaws would end Ta's life. Slowly, very slowly, Tai raised his eyes to meet Beck's. In the world of predators, direct eye contact was a challenge. But Ta had noticed something in the videos of moonshades together. They did make eye contact, but in a special way. Ta blinked slowly, 3 times. This was how moonshade pack members greeted each other. It meant, "I see you. I know you." Beck's growl stopped. The beast stared at Ta for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, Bake blinked back. 3 slow blinks. "What just happened?" asked Jin. "Communication," said Captain Lee quietly. For 5 minutes, neither Tai nor Bake moved. They just looked at each other. Then Tai did something that made the watchers gasp. Slowly, he raised one hand. "Don't," called Queen Sue. "He will bite." But Tai kept his hand moving, very slowly. He held it palm up, fingers slightly curled. This was not a human gesture. It was pure moonshade body language, saying, "I offer peace." Bake watched the hand carefully. His ears moved forward with interest. Then, to the amazement of everyone watching, he lowered his massive head and sniffed Ta's palm. "I don't believe it," said a Nuri advisor. "No one has ever been this close without being attacked." Ta spoke for the first time since entering the room. His voice was soft and calm. "Hello, Bake. My name is Ta." The words meant nothing to the moonshade, of course, but the calm, low tone carried a message of its own. Ta continued speaking softly in his native Korean, letting Bake get used to his voice. After a few minutes of this, Ta slowly stood up. Bake backed up a few steps but didn't growl. Ta reached into his pocket and took out a small blue ball. "What's he doing now?" asked Jin. Ta tossed the ball gently to the side. Bake's head turned to follow it. The ball had a strong smell that Ta had learned moonshades found interesting. Bake walked over to the ball and sniffed it. He pushed it with his nose. Then he looked back at Ta. Ta smiled. "You're not just a killer, are you? You're bored and lonely. No one's ever tried to understand you." For the rest of the hour, Ta stayed in the room with Bake. He didn't try to touch the moonshade again. He didn't try to give commands. He simply existed in the same space, sometimes talking, sometimes quiet. When the time was up, Ta walked slowly to the exit door. Bake watched him go but made no move to follow or attack. Outside, people surrounded Ta with questions, but Queen Sue's voice rose above the others. "How?" she asked simply. "How did you do that?" Ta smiled. "I spoke his language, not mine. This is just the beginning. For the next 3 days, Ta spent hours with Buck. Each meeting was a little longer than the one before. By now, most of the watchers had gotten bored. Ta didn't do tricks or give commands. He just sat in the room, sometimes talking, sometimes quiet. "I don't see progress," said Dai, the Queen's chief advisor. "The beast does not obey him." "Patience," said Queen Su. "The human has a plan." On the 4th day, Ta brought a chair into the room. He sat and opened a book. He read out loud in a soft voice, speaking Korean. Buck lay across the room, watching. "What is he reading?" asked Queen Su, who was one of the few who still came to watch. "Old stories from Earth," said Captain Lee. "Tales about wolves and humans." Ta thinks the sound of his voice helps Buck get used to him. As Ta read, he began to hum between paragraphs. The tune was simple and slow. It was an old Korean lullaby his grandmother had sung to him as a child. Buck's ears perked up at the sound. The moonshade lifted his head and watched Ta more closely. Ta hummed the tune again. This time, Buck stood up. Slowly, the huge beast walked across the room. Everyone watching went still. Buck stopped just a few feet from Ta's chair. The moonshade tilted his head, listening to the humming. "What's happening?" whispered Jin. "I think the sound is similar to something in moonshade communication," said Captain Lee. "Look how interested he is." Ta kept humming. He didn't look directly at Buck. He just turned the page in his book and continued. After a minute, Buck lay down on the floor near Ta's feet. "Amazing," said Queen Su. "He's never voluntarily been that close to anyone except me. And even then, not calmly like this." For 2 hours, Ta read and hummed. Buck stayed by his feet. Once, the moonshade even closed his eyes, as if the humming was putting him to sleep. When the session ended, Ta closed his book and stood up. He walked to the exit but stopped at the door. He turned and looked at Buck. "See you tomorrow, friend," he said. The next day, Ta brought a new item, a brush with soft bristles. As usual, he sat in his chair and began to read and hum. Buck came over sooner this time, lying down by Ta's feet after just a few minutes. After an hour of reading, Ta slowly reached down with the brush. Buck watched but didn't move away. Very gently, Ta brushed the silver-blue fur on Buck's back. The moonshade stiffened at first. Then, gradually, he relaxed. His yellow eyes half closed in pleasure. "The fur must get itchy," Ta said softly. "No one helps you with that, do they?" For weeks, this was the pattern. Ta would read, hum, and brush Buck's fur. Each day, the moonshade seemed more relaxed around him. "This is not training," complained Da. "The beast still follows no commands." "That's not his goal," said Captain Lee. "Ta's building trust first." On the 10th day, something new happened. As Ta was reading, Buck suddenly stood up. The moonshade walked to the far wall and pawed at it, making a low whining sound. "What's wrong?" asked Ta. Buck pawed at the wall again, more urgently. Ta closed his book and walked over. He could hear something on the other side of the wall, voices arguing. "Someone's upset out there," said Ta. He put his hand on the wall. To his surprise, Buck moved closer and pressed against Ta's leg. The door opened, and Jin came in. "Ta, you need to come out. There's a problem." Ta nodded. He walked to the door, but this time he did something new. He held his hand up to Buck and made a gentle clicking sound with his tongue. "Come," he said softly. Everyone in the viewing area went silent. Buck looked at Ta's hand. Then, slowly, the massive beast walked forward and followed Ta out of the room. "He's done it," gasped Queen Su. "The moonshade follows him." But Ta knew it wasn't about following commands. This was something deeper. Buck wasn't following a master. He was walking beside a friend. Outside the training room, people were arguing loudly. Ta stepped into the hallway with Buck close by his side. The moonshade's fur was slightly raised, but he made no aggressive moves. "What's happening?" Tai asked Jin. "Some of the Nuri crew are unhappy about the talks," said Jin. "There's a group that doesn't want to share technology with humans." Captain Lee was speaking with Da, the Queen's advisor. Their faces were tense. "Where is Queen Su?" asked Ta. "At the big meeting in the main hall," said Jin. "All the important people from both sides are there to start writing the trade agreement." Suddenly, a loud alarm sounded throughout the building. Red lights flashed in the hallway. Buck growled, his yellow eyes looking around quickly. "What is that?" Tai asked, placing a calming hand on Buck's back. "Security alarm," shouted Captain Lee. "The meeting hall has been breached." Guards ran past them, heading toward the main hall. Captain Lee turned to Ta. "Stay here where it's safe," he ordered. Then he ran after the guards. Ta looked down at Buck. The moonshade was agitated, pulling toward the direction of the alarm. "He senses something's wrong," said Ta. "He wants to find the queen." "You can't go there," said Jin. "It's too dangerous." But Ta was already moving, following Buck, who pulled ahead. The moonshade seemed to know exactly where to go, following paths through the building that Ta didn't even know existed. They turned a corner and found two Nuri lying on the floor, injured. One looked up at Todd with fear. "Rebels," he gasped. "They want to kill the queen. Stop the treaty." Bake sniffed the air and growled. He moved faster now, with Todd running to keep up. They reached a side door to the main hall. Inside, Tai could hear shouting and the sound of energy weapons. "We should wait for help," said Tai, but Bake wasn't waiting. The moonshade pushed through the door, forcing Ta to follow. The scene inside was chaos. Tables were turned over. People hid behind them. At the front of the room, Queen Su was surrounded by 3 Nuri in dark clothes. They had weapons pointed at her. Most of her guards were down. "The treaty dies with you," said one of the attackers, a Nuri that Tay recognized as Han, a lower officer from the Queen's ship. Tad looked for Captain Lee or other human guards, but they must have been blocked from entering. He and Bake were alone with the attackers. One of the rebels saw Tai and turned his weapon toward him. "Kill the human too." Before the rebel could fire, Bake moved. The moonshade leaped across the room faster than Tai had ever seen him move. His huge body slammed into the rebel, knocking the weapon away. The other attackers turned in surprise. One fired at Bake, but the moonshade was already moving again. With teeth and claws, he attacked the rebels, driving them away from the queen. "Bake, careful," called Tai, afraid the moonshade would kill the attackers. To everyone's amazement, Bake didn't go for their throats as a moonshade normally would. Instead, he knocked them down and held them with his massive paws, growling but not biting. Queen Su stared in disbelief. He's restraining them, not killing them. Ta moved carefully to the queen's side. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, still watching Bake in amazement. "He came to protect me." But how did he know? Just then, Captain Lee burst in with guards. They quickly secured the rebels. Bake backed away from them and returned to Ta's side, pressing against his leg. "Good boy," said Ta softly, running his hand through the silver-blue fur. "Very good boy." The queen approached slowly. For the first time, there was no fear in her eyes when she looked at Bake. "He saved my life," she said, "but he obeyed you. He didn't kill when you told him to be careful." Ta smiled. "He's not obeying me. He's working with me. There's a difference." Queen Su looked at Todd with new respect. "Your ways are strange to us. We try to control through fear. You connect through what? Love." "Understanding," said Ta. "Respect. Bake is smart. He knows who wishes you harm and who doesn't." As if to prove his point, Bake moved forward and gently pressed his head against the queen's hand. For the first time ever, Queen Su touched her guardian without fear. "I think," she said slowly, Humans have much to teach us beyond star maps and trade. 2 days after the attack, Queen Sue called for a special meeting. All the important humans and Nuri gathered in a large room. Guards stood at every door, watching for any new threats. Tai sat in the front row with Bake, lying calmly at his feet. People still kept their distance, but no one seemed afraid of the moonshade anymore. Queen Sue stood and raised her hands for quiet. "What happened 2 days ago changed everything," she said. "The rebels have been dealt with. Now we must talk about the future." She looked at Tai and Bake. "The human has done what no Nuri could do. He has formed a bond with a moonshade. This goes beyond our agreement." Captain Lee nodded. "Ta has shown that humans and Nuri can work together in new ways." Queen Sue walked closer to Ta. She still moved carefully around Bake, but there was no fear in her eyes now. "Tell us," she said, "how did you do what our best trainers could not?" Ta stood up. He rested one hand on Bak's head as he spoke. "Your people tried to break Bak's spirit, to make him obey through fear. This only made him angry and dangerous. And you did not?" asked Da, who still seemed doubtful. "I respected him," said Ta. "I learned his language, how moonshades talk to each other with their bodies and scents. I didn't try to be his master. I tried to be his friend." Queen Sue looked thoughtful. "This is very different from our ways." Ta nodded. "Humans evolved on Earth alongside predators. For thousands of years, we lived with dangerous animals. Some, like wolves, eventually became our partners, our dogs. We learned to understand their minds." To everyone's surprise, Tai turned to Bug and made a soft clicking sound with his tongue. The moonshade stood up. Tai held out his hand flat and moved it down slowly. Buck lay down again. "He follows commands," said one of the Nuri. "No," said Ta. "He understands what I'm asking, and he chooses to do it. There's a big difference." Tai reached into his pocket and took out a small treat he had made specially for Bake. The moonshade took it gently from his fingers. "On Earth, we have a saying," said Ta. "You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar." It means kindness works better than fear or force. Queen Sue turned to her people. "I have made a decision. From now on, Ta will be Bak's official keeper. The moonshade will stay with him." They stepped forward. "But your majesty, Bake is your royal protector." "And he will continue to be," said the queen. "But Ta has earned the right to be his primary caretaker. They have a bond that we must respect." She looked at Captain Lee. "If your people agree, I would like Tai to teach our handlers about his methods. Perhaps we can learn to bond with other animals as humans do." Captain Lee smiled. "I think that can be arranged." Later that day, Ta sat alone with Bug in a quiet room. The moonshade lay with his head on Ta's lap, eyes half closed as Ta brushed his fur. "You understand more than they think, don't you?" Ta said softly in Korean. "You're not just an animal. You're a person in your own way." Bake made a soft sound, almost like a purr. His yellow eyes looked up at Ta with what seemed like affection. Jin came in and stopped at the door, still careful around Bake. "They're drawing up new agreements," he said. "You're going to be important in the talks now." "Me?" asked Ta, surprised. "You showed them something they never understood before," said Jin. "The Queen says humans have a special gift for connecting with other species. She wants to know more." Ta smiled and continued brushing Bak's silver-blue fur. "It's not really a gift," he said. "It's just respect. Seeing others as they are, not as we want them to be." Bake stretched and pressed his large head against Ta's chest. The moonshade who had killed 23 Nuri now acted like a big house cat with his new friend. "Whatever it is," said Jin, "you've changed everything. Humans and Nuri will work together because of what you did." Ta nodded. He hadn't come to the stars to be important, or to change history. He had just wanted to understand the creatures who lived among the strange new worlds. But sometimes, understanding was the most powerful force of all. A week passed. The talks between humans and Nuri went well. The rebels who had tried to kill the queen were now in prison. Peace seemed certain. But Ta noticed something was wrong with Bake. The moonshade was eating less. He paced in their room at night. His yellow eyes looked out the windows at the strange stars. He misses the wild, Ta told Queen Sue one morning. Buck was born in the forests of your world. He needs to run free sometimes. The queen looked worried. Moonshades are hunters. It is in their blood. But there is nothing to hunt here on this colony. Ta had been thinking about this problem. Let me take him to your ship. We can use the transport to visit your home world. Just for a few days. Buck needs to feel the soil under his paws again. Queen Sue shook her head. Too dangerous. Some of my people still don't trust humans. And the forests are not safe. Please, said Ta. I believe this is important for Buck's health. After much talk, the queen finally agreed. 2 days later, Tai and Bake boarded the Nuri ship with Queen Sue and her guards. It would be a short trip, just 3 days to the Nuri homeworld, 3 days there and 3 days back. As they traveled through space, Ta spent hours looking at pictures of the Nuri forests where moonshades lived. They were strange and beautiful, with tall blue trees and purple plants. When they arrived, Tai could hardly believe his eyes. He was the first human to ever set foot on the Nuri world. The sky was a deep violet color. The air smelled sweet and rich. We will go to my family's land, said Queen Sue. There is a forest there where Bak can hunt safely. They flew in a small ship to a quiet area far from the Nuri cities. Green mountains rose in the distance. Blue forests spread out below them. As soon as they landed, Bake became excited. He smelled the air and pawed at the door, eager to get out. Be careful, warned Da, who had come with them. Wild moonshades live in these woods. They may attack Buck as an outsider. We'll be fine, said Ta. Buck knows how to talk to his own kind. The queen's guards wanted to come along, but Ta said no. Buck needs to hunt. That means killing. It won't be pleasant to watch, and too many people will scare the prey away. Queen Sue nodded. He goes alone with Bake. But take this, she said, handing Tai a small device. If you need help, press this button. Ta put the device in his pocket. Then he and Bake walked into the blue forest together. As soon as they were among the trees, Bake changed. He moved differently, more alert, more alive. His nose worked constantly, picking up smells that Tai couldn't detect. For hours, they walked deeper into the forest. Ta saw strange birds with 6 wings and small animals that looked like blue rabbits. Buck ignored these. He was hunting for something bigger. Near sunset, Bake froze. His ears pointed forward. Ahead, in a small clearing, was an animal that looked like a deer, but with a long, snake-like neck. Buck looked at Tai as if asking permission. Go ahead, whispered Ta. Do what you need to do. Bake moved silently through the trees. Ta stayed back, watching. The moonshade was beautiful in his element, all power and grace. The hunt was quick. With one leap, Bake brought down the deer creature. It was over in seconds. Later, as night fell, Tai made a small camp while Bake ate his kill. The forest was getting dark. Strange sounds came from all directions. We should head back in the morning, Ta said to Buck, who was now resting with a full stomach. But as Tai prepared to sleep, he heard a crack behind him. He turned just in time to see a fallen tree coming down the hill toward him. He jumped aside, but his foot caught on a root. Pain shot through his ankle as he fell. Tai tried to stand but couldn't. His ankle was badly twisted, maybe broken. The camp was ruined. Worst of all, night was coming fast, and strange eyes glowed in the darkness around them. Bake growled at the shadows. He stood over Tai, protecting him. Good boy, said Tai through gritted teeth. Looks like we're in trouble now. The night in the alien forest was cold and full of danger. Tai sat with his back against a tree, his injured ankle throbbing with pain. He reached for the emergency button Queen Sue had given him, but found that it had been crushed when he fell. "Looks like we're on our own, Buck," he said quietly. Buck stood guard, his massive body between Ty and the forest. Yellow eyes glowed in the darkness beyond, wild moonshades watching them. One of the wild ones howled, a long, eerie sound that made Ta's skin crawl. "They're not happy we're here," Ta whispered. The night grew colder. Ta shivered, wishing he had brought warmer clothes. To his surprise, Bake moved closer and lay down beside him, pressing his warm body against Ta's. The moonshade's silver-blue fur gave off heat like a blanket. "Thank you, friend," said Ta, grateful for the warmth. Throughout the night, the wild moonshades circled their camp. Sometimes they came close, testing Buck's resolve. Each time, Bake stood and growled, showing his teeth. The wild ones always backed away. Ta dozed off near dawn. He woke to find Bake still beside him, alert and watchful. The wild moonshades were gone. "We need to get back," Ta said, trying again to stand. His ankle couldn't hold his weight. "But I can't walk." Bake seemed to understand. The moonshaves stood and moved in front of Ta, then crouched down low. "You want me to ride on your back?" Ta asked, surprised. Buck turned his head and made a soft sound, as if saying yes. Carefully, Ta pulled himself onto Buck's back. He held onto the thick fur around the moonshade's neck. Buck stood up slowly, making sure Ta was secure, then began walking through the forest toward the landing area. The journey was slow but steady. Buck chose an easy path, avoiding rough ground. When they stopped to rest by a stream, Bake even caught a small animal for Ta to eat. "I'm supposed to be taking care of you," Ta said with a smile. "Not the other way around." By late afternoon, they'd reached the edge of the forest. The Nuri ship was visible in the distance. Buck let out a loud howl to signal their return. Within minutes, Queen Sue and her guards came running. Their faces showed shock when they saw Ta riding on Buck's back. "You're hurt," said the queen, helping Ta down. "And you survived a night in the forest." "Impossible." "Not impossible with Bake," said Ta, patting the moonshade's head. "He protected me all night from wild moonshades. He kept me warm. He even carried me back." Queen Sue looked at Bake with new eyes. "Such loyalty. I've never seen it in a moonshade before." The ship's doctor treated Ta's ankle. It was badly sprained but not broken. As Tai rested in the medical bay, Queen Sue came to speak with him. "What you have done changes everything," she said. "For generations, we Nuri have tried to control the creatures of our world through force. You've shown us a better way." Ta nodded. "Respect works better than fear. Understanding works better than control." 2 days later, they returned to Gemini. News of Ta's adventure had spread. When the ship landed, many humans and Nuri waited to greet them. Ta walked down the ramp slowly, using a crutch. Buck stayed close by his side. Captain Lee approached with a big smile. "The treaty is signed," he said. "And there's more. The Queen has asked for human teachers to come to her world. She wants to learn our ways of working with animals. And I want Ta to lead this program," added Queen Sue, who had followed them down the ramp. "If he agrees." Ta looked surprised. "Me? I'm just an animal expert." "You are much more," said the Queen. "You have shown us that what we thought was human weakness, your care for other creatures, is actually your greatest strength." 1 month later, Ta stood on a platform before a group of young Nuri students. Behind him was a screen showing pictures of earth animals, wolves, dogs, horses, and more. "Today we begin to learn a new way," Ta said. "Not how to control, but how to connect." Bake lay at Ta's feet, relaxed and content. In the back of the room, Queen Sue watched with approval. "Who would have thought," she said quietly to Captain Lee, "that a human would teach us how to live better on our own world?" "That's what humans do best," said Captain Lee. "We connect. We understand, even across the stars." Ta smiled at his students, then down at his friend Bake. The journey had just begun.